Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Ari Sachs of Congregation Beth Mordechai coming to you with another edition of this week's online Parashah class. Before I begin, I actually want to wish a special Mazel Tov to my cousin Yaakov Sachs and his wife Devorah on the bris of their newborn baby who was named today. His name is Noach Shraga. I was at the bris. It was a beautiful moment for the whole family. I want to wish a special Mazel Tov to you if you see this video. We're going this week to talk about Parashat Lkha, one of the more famous Torah portions in the entire Torah, because it has the story of the 12 spies. A story that is known from Hebrew school time up until, it mentioned in politics and just in culture, the idea that, or the story of how the Israelites got Moses to send people out to scout the land, or la-tur et haaretz, and we're going to get to that in a moment, but wanted to go out and to scout and spy the land. And so he sent 12 spies, 12 leaders of the tribes of Israel, and 10 of them came back with, or of course the story goes that 10 of them came back with negative reports, 2 of them came back with positive reports. The people were very upset and very concerned and very worried, and then God said, why did you do this? Why did you these people are not going to follow me, and ended up punishing the people because they did not believe, because they believed in the spies' reports, and therefore that they were going to then swallow up all those leaders who believed in those particular bad reports, and as such, to show that you can't necessarily trust people to go and do God's work, it seems. So in this Torah portion, we have this concept that the people want to send others out to look and see if this is a land that is not only worthwhile, but to see what dangers are there. And God not only acquiesces, but God seems to be saying, as we'll learn later on, that it's a pretty good idea for them to do it. And as we focus on this, the very first line, that the word that is used to describe what they're about to do, what they're about to do, is the word la-tur, that they will scout, or that they will spy the land. So let's just get straight to this particular verse to understand how it's used in context. So we have at the very beginning of chapter 13, which is the beginning of our Torah portion, Vaydaber Adonai Moshe lemor, the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Shlach Lkha anashim, send forth, send for you, send out men, veyaturu et eretz Canaan, and that they shall spy, others would say scout, the land of Israel, asher ani noten livnei Yisrael, that I am giving to the children of Israel. Ish echad lemate avotav tishlachu. You shall send one man from each of the different tribes of their fathers. Tishlachu kol nasi vahem, and that you shall send the prince, everyone the prince among them, which seems to be the leaders of each of the different tribes. So a couple of just things from the verse that we're not really going to be focusing on, but I think it's important just to mention, is that there are many different kinds of ways in which God is commanding Moses to pinpoint who that he's about to send. Ish echad, that you should do one man. Then more specifically, Ish echad lemate avotav tishlachu, you shall send one man from the tribe of their nations. And then kol nasi vahem, you shall send a prince, almost as if it's kind of raising in status, that you just have one person. And then you should send one person from each of the tribes, and then you should send the prince from each of those tribes. It kind of invokes that same feeling as you get when God says to Abram that he shall have that he shall send his son, his only son, the one that he loves, to be sacrificed on Mount Moriah. and that there's three different ways in which to understand who this one individual is. And perhaps it's just the way that the Torah functions, but that we eventually get to this point where it's supposed to be a leader among the tribes who are going out to actually spy on the land. The second article I just want to bring your attention to is this idea of Asher ani noten livnei Yisrael. And this is something that I'm going to be talking about a little bit more in the service for our morning service tomorrow in synagogue at Beth Mordechai. But that God basically is sending out these scouts knowing that God is going to be giving the land of Israel. So that it seems as if there is already a quid pro quo that you're going to go spy, but it doesn't mean that we're going to maybe change what we're going to be doing. This is still the land God is saying that I'm going to give you. And as such, the scouting seems to be, well, based upon what we know from previous story, that seems to be more just to alleviate the concern of the Israelites. And we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. But that the spying is not done necessarily to change the opinion of what it is that they're about to do. Not to say we shouldn't be going or we should be going, but rather just to kind of give a play-by-play as to what they actually see. So knowing that it's supposed to be a leader, knowing that they've already decided, God's already decided that this is the land that we're going to go to, there's no real choice in the matter, I think that gives a little bit of background to understanding what this term taturu means. Taturu, or la-tur, in the sense here, is that you will go out to see, to scour, to scout, to spy even this particular land. In other words, that what you're about to do is to use all of your senses, whether that's your eyes, your ears, your legs, your touch, to use everything that you have in order to go out and use those abilities to see what it is that is out there. Nothing necessarily so unique about that particular term, but let's take a look at how Rashi understands this usage of the word la-tur. So we're going to now turn to Rashi, the great medieval French commentator, to understand how he sees it. Actually, what I'm going to do is talk about him in another context, but that it seems to indicate that the goal of that this usage of the term la-tur seems to indicate what they're going to be seeing at the end of the day, meaning that they're going to be seeing something that is more cognizant of their own way of conceptualizing the issue, meaning that they're going to go out and see with their own two eyes what kind of people there are. They're not going to necessarily have, God is telling us to come and do this. They're going to just be looking for themselves as individuals. And on one hand, we may feel like that's a very positive thing, that we should be able to look at a situation with our own eyes. That term la-tur is used in a different context at the very end of our Torah portion. It's actually in the third of the cycle, so the cycle that we're not going to be reading tomorrow in Shul, but that in the very last third, in the command to wear tzitzit, the fringes, and it's a command that is recited every weekday morning in our Sidurim, that the Israelites shall lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei enechem, that they should not follow, or that word la-tur appears here, so maybe it's to scout or to spy according to their hearts and also to their eyes. So that here, in one context, at the very beginning of our Torah portion, we have that the Israelites should be scouting with their own eyes. And on the other hand, we have that they should not be scouting with their own eyes and their own hearts. And in that regard, Rashi says, and we're going to share his teaching right here, Velo taturu acharei levavchem, that you shall not follow according to your hearts, kimo mitor haaretz. And he references, it's not our exact verse in this very beginning of the Torah portion, but another moment in which Moses is basically talking to, or God's talking to Moses, and Moses is talking to the people about how the Israelites are going to scout the land. So that in that first context, that they're supposed to scout the land, but that in that same kind of act here now at the very end of the Torah portion, that we're not supposed to scout in that same way. And what does Rashi mean by that? Halev v'ha'einayim hem meraglim laguf. The heart and the eyes, they are the spies of the body. So just like the spies went out and they did this act of tour, they did this act of scouting, of spying with their own senses, the eyes and our eyes and our hearts are the spies, are the senses that are used to scout for the body. And what is so bad about, what is the trouble with that, or the challenge with that? Umisarserim lo et ha'avirot. And what happens is that these different functions of the body, these eyes and hearts, mediate the sins of the body. In other words, ha'ain ro'eh ve'halev chomed, the eye sees and the heart desires, ve'haguf oseh et ha'averot, and the body commits sins. So what Rashi, I think, is indicating here is that this concept of la-tur, of to scout, of to spy, is one that is very much based in our physical bodies. Or to put it another way, in our most basic kind of existence as human beings, the part of ourselves that is separate from God, that we use our instincts to lead ourselves astray. So that our hearts, when we feel something, when our eyes, when they see something, and we're doing it simply to reflect what we think that we're seeing ourselves, that what he's indicating is that that's going to lead ourselves astray. And it certainly seems that he is reading our conception of the spies as ones who saw what they saw and brought back reports which were seemingly bad. We'll get into whether that's true or not tomorrow in services, but that they bring these bad reports because they're only seeing with their own eyes and they're not seeing with God's eyes. And that aspect is very, very critical, because as we will see in a moment, from the Rashbam, who is Rashi's grandson, he looks at another act of seeing in this command of wearing tzitzit. V'haya lachem letzitzit, and that you should have tzitzit. And the next phrase in the Torah is that uritem oto, and that you shall see it, meaning that you shall have these tzitzit. And the actual act, if you're davening, if you're praying and you're wearing the tzitzit and you've gathered together the tzitzit, it's not only that you kiss them when you say the word tzitzit, but when you say the words or itemoto, you actually are supposed to look at the tzitzit, as if when you look at the tzitzit, you're supposed to be led in a certain direction. So here we have a case where we're using our eyes, we're using these meraglim at these spies, as Rashi is pointing out, but done in a positive context to look at our tzitzit. And why is that a positive thing as opposed to or item or why is it positive here and not positive when we are simply seeing what our eyes see? Because, as Rashbam goes on to say, Petil hatzitzit hazeh, meaning that the blue thread, there's supposed to be a blue thread among the white tzitzit, that this blue thread, lachem l'riyah shetiru otel, it's supposed to be something that you see. Kamo mitzitz min hacharachim, almost as if it's like this little thread that sticks out from somewhere. V'chein matzati b'sifri, and thus I found in this midrash that is called Sifri, v'gam petil techelet, and also this strand of blue, this thread of blue, Pirshu Rabotenu, that is explained by the rabbis, Lefi shehatchelet domeh layam, that since the techelet, this blue thread of the tzitzit, is similar to the color of water, Veyam domeh lerakia, and the sea or the water, the water on the ground is similar to the expanse of the sky above, harking back to the story of creation in which God separated the waters from the heavens and the earth. Verakia lekiseh hakavod, and the expanse of the sky is similar to the glory of heaven, and that in especially more mystical literature, that the throne is considered to be sitting on sapphire, and that the idea of this bluish color is actually the color associated with the throne of heaven, so that when you look at the tzitzit, you are using your own eyes, but when you are using your own eyes, you're seeing what God wants you to see. And that, I think, is the real crux of the debate here. It's not a question of whether or not you're allowed to use your own physical faculties, whether that's your eyes or your heart, your emotions, your hands and arms, your ability to touch, whether or not you're allowed to use them, but what is the kavanah, what is the direction in which you are using them? And that's where I think the idea of having a hearty sense of doubt comes into play. When God sends the spies to go spy, it seems that this is something that God would want. And for that, we're going to take a look quickly at a text from the Talmud, from Masechet Sotah. And we're actually going to pick it up in the middle, where it says, actually from the beginning, in terms of this phrase, Shlach Lkha Nashim, that you shall send people, Amar Reish Lakish, Shlach Lkha mida'atcha, that you shall send forth people from your knowledge, almost as if to say that you shall do it in their own ways of understanding what it is that they're seeing when they go out as spies. V'chi adam ze borer chelek ra la'atzmo. But are we sure that the people are going to borer chelek ra la'atzmo, that they're going to choose to look at it in an evil way? Meaning that our conception of the spies is that they do so in thinking it's such a bad report, and they're using their eyes and their hearts to look at it the wrong way. But why do we assume that that's going to be the case? V'hainu dichti dvarim vayitav be'enai hadavar, and that we learn from this verse in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, that where the Torah says that and the thing was good in my eyes. And the context is that it seems, we're going to actually take a look at that right now. It seems from the context that it is God saying to the Israelites that this act of spying was good in my eyes. So where it says, verse 22, "Vatikruvna elai kulchem vatamru nishlacha anashim lefanenu v'yachperu lanu et haaretz," and you come near to me, every one of you, and said, "Let us send men before us, that they may search the land for us. V'yashuvu otanu davar et haderech asher na'aleh ba," and bring us back the word by the way which we must go up. Ve'et ha'arim asher navo alehen, and the cities into which we shall come. In other words, Israelites saying, we want to spy the land. Vayita be'enai hadavar, and the thing pleased me well. So in other words, this phrase vayita be'enai hadavar seems to be from the perspective of God, but that the perspective of God, and that it was good that the Israelites wanted to go out. Almost as if to say that we do have that ability to look upon the world with our own eyes and to see things that are going to end in a good place. But this just wasn't one of those cases. Reish Lakish comes back and says, Be'enai velo be'enav shel makom. Reish Lakish says, in my eyes, and not in the eyes of the place or of God. In other words, that the challenge is we must try to look at what we see through the perspective of God. But when we look at it, but if we're looking at it only through our eyes and not that perspective, we're going to be led astray. Which leads to the ultimate challenge. How do we know if our belief system, if our views on the world, if our decision making is actually based upon what we think is what God wants of us in that moment? How do we know we're not just coming into the thoughts ourselves? Meaning, how do we know that we're not just making up what we think is right, and that it actually is what God would want from us? And that seems to be the challenge here. On one hand, the beginning of the Torah portion, God's saying you should be able to go out and check out with your own eyes because you have the ability to make a decision based upon what you think I would want. And then the spies go out, and according to our tradition, they don't. And so at the very end, we have this line saying, don't follow according to your hearts and your eyes, but only use them in order to see God. It's almost explicit, that knowledge. You're supposed to look at everything as if you're looking at the tzitzit, you're looking at the tzechelet to see if God is there. And so how do we take that? What is the lesson that we gain from that? And I really do believe it has to do with the importance, or let's say the religious value of having self-doubt when it comes to what we see or what we feel. That when we see something and it seems to be black and white, or that we feel something to be true, that we need to be humble enough to check ourselves and to make sure that, are we really feeling this in the right way? Is there something maybe nagging at us that we've put aside because we really want that job, or we really want to spend this money in this capacity, or whatever the desire, the feeling is that we really want to do? Are we sure that this is, in religious speak, what God wants us to do in this moment? And it's not to say that we're going to be wrong, but it's to say that we're not always right. And to have enough positive doubt to be able to be humble enough to ask ourselves, is this really the right path? Because if we ask ourselves that question, if we have enough doubt so that we're not like the spies, and we are more like the ones who are looking at or trying to find the techelet, try to find that sign of God in everything that we do, that when we use our eyes and our hearts, that we will be able to make decisions that better not just our own lives, but to make God's name great in this world, and ultimately to make this world a better place. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this week's Parsha class, and I'll see you again next week. All the best, and bye-bye.